In this lecture, you are going to learn about the culture of the 1950s and the counterculture of the 1950s. The US comes out of World War II the most powerful and richest country in the world. World War II creates what we think of as contemporary America, driven by a consumerist culture. And the shopping mall replaces the church as the center of American culture. The post-war prosperity is very similar to the post-war prosperity after World War I, but after World War II, it will be amplified. And like in the 1920s, businesses pick up on the fact that Americans want to be mobile, and the car becomes once again the consumer item everyone wants to have. Americans become obsessed with the automobile, and everything begins to surround this concept. Drive-in theaters, motor hotels or motels, drive-in restaurants are all catered to be around the car. Moreover, we begin to build roads that take us places. The U.S. government authorizes the Interstate Highway Act, a law authorizing the construction of a national highway system. The highway system was promoted as essential to national defense and economic growth. Eisenhower believed that a modern interstate highway system could provide citizens with evacuation routes from the cities and could also allow the rapid movement of military equipment across the country. The National Highway System accelerated the movement of people and goods and changed the nature of American communities. The new mobility allowed for people to move to different places and no region experienced the post-war economic booms more intensely than the South and the Southwest. The availability of the air conditioner now allowed people to live more comfortably in the region. A pleasant natural environment drew new residents to the West and Southwest, but nothing proved stronger than the promise of economic opportunity. So important was the defense industry to the South and the Southwest that those regions later were referred to as the Gun Belt. The high technology basis for post-war economic development drew well-educated, highly skilled workers to the West, but the economic promise also attracted the poor. Although suburbs had existed since the 19th century, nothing symbolizes the affluent society more than their tremendous expansion in the 1950s. The government subsidized homeownership with low interest mortgage guarantees and by making interest on mortgages tax deductible. The suburbs were just outside of the city in housing developments that stretched for miles. There was very little space between houses, just a fence dividing you from your neighbor. This meant that the concept of competing with the Joneses was more important than ever, given the consumer culture and the fact that you lived so close to your neighbors, you could see when a new washer was being delivered or when they purchased a new car. Although the purchase and display of consumer goods had always been part of the American life, by the 1950s, consumption became vital for economic prosperity and essential to individuals' identity and status. America's consumer economy reshaped how Americans experience culture and shaped their identities. The affluent society gave Americans new experiences, new outlets, and new ways to understand and interact with one another. Several forces, including a population surge and consumer borrowing, spurred this unparalleled abundance. By 1947, 5.7 million American families are classified as middle class, and they have enough money for leisure, entertainment, and culture, as well as necessities. By the early 1960s, this figure would grow to 12 million. Television was instantly popular, so much so that by early 1948, Newsweek reported that it was catching on like a case of high-toned scarlet fever. Indeed, between 1948 and 1955, close to two-thirds of the nation's households purchased a television set. By the end of the 1950s, 90% of American families had one, and the average viewer was turning in for almost 5 hours a day. The big radio broadcasting companies, NBC, CBS, and the American Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, used their technical expertise and capital reserves to conquer the television airways. The limited number of channels and programs meant that networks selected programs that appealed to the widest possible audience to draw viewers and advertisers, television's greatest financiers. The need to appeal to as many people as possible promoted the production of non-controversial shows aimed at the entire family. Programs such as Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver featured light topics, humor, and a guaranteed happy ending the whole family could enjoy. Television's broad appeal, however, was about more than money and entertainment. Shows of the 1950s, such as Father Knows Best and I Love Lucy, idealized the nuclear family, traditional gender roles, and the white middle class domesticity. Leave It to Beaver, which became the prototypical example of the 1950s television family, depicted its breadwinner, father, and homemaker mother guiding their children through life lessons. Such shows and Cold War America broadly reinforce a popular consensus that such lifestyles were not only beneficial, but the most effective way to safeguard American prosperity against communist threats and social deviancy. The new medium of television offered Americans a welcome respite from Cold War anxieties. But unlike government-financed television in Europe, American TV was paid for by private enterprise. TV became the major vehicle for hawking the products of the affluent society and creating a consumer culture. In 1961, Newton Minow, chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, called television a vast wasteland, but it came to dominate Americans' leisure time, influence their consumption patterns, and shape the perceptions of the nation's leadership. Women's presence in the labor force increased due to the need to support themselves and their families, as well as their desire to secure some of the new consumer products. Despite married women's growing employment, the dominant ideology celebrated traditional family life and conventional gender roles. The ideal was for fathers providing for the family as breadwinners. Women expected to define themselves as mothers, wives, and homemakers. Here you see Donna Reed vacuum cleaning in high heels and pearls. The idea was that the fulfillment would come from marriage. Women in the 1950s were getting married at the average age of 20. Post-war prosperity facilitated and in turn was supported by the ongoing post-war baby boom. From 1946 to 1964, American fertility experienced an unprecedented spike. After years of economic depression, families were now wealthy enough to support larger families and had homes large enough to accommodate them, while women married younger and American culture celebrated the ideal of a large family. Although we tend to associate the 1950s with the ideal family perfection, the reality was quite different. The rise of consumerism puts pressure on fathers to provide all the consumer stuff. Men do not have a lot of meaning in their work lives, generally speaking. Thus, the image of dad coming home and wanted a stiff drink and bored was not uncommon. Not to mention that many of the dads of the 1950s were in fact World War II and Korean War veterans, many who in fact came home after experiencing the horrors of war. So feeling the stresses of society becomes part of the daily life in many American homes. Arthur Miller's The Death of a Salesman reflects this hollowness. Women are the cornerstone of the 1950s society, no doubt, but many suburban housewives and mothers were the 1950s' worst critics. Immersed in the culture of abundance and prosperity, these women remain unfulfilled, bored, and lonely. Brady Freeman wrote The Feminine Mystique in 1963, detailing the resentment and anger that the 1950s suburban housewives were experiencing. Thousands of women living supposedly happy lives confess that they are not happy at all. We also see youth rebelling against conformity. We see this rebellion manifested in popular culture, such as with the movie Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean about a lost teen. We also got rock and roll during this time period. Whatever you might think of his music, Elvis Presley is huge during this time period. And he definitely stirs it up with all that hip swinging. Rock and roll was deemed inappropriate, crude, rebellious, and according to some, the rock and roll dance moves would lead to sex. So rock and roll does not fit into our neat picture of the 1950s. It's definitely an attempt to break out of the mold. It seems mild to us now, but it wasn't at the time. The most blatant revolt came from the self-proclaimed Beat Generation, a small group of literary figures based in New York City and San Francisco. The Beats represented a widespread group of artists who rejected the dominant culture of the 1950s. They believed their work more reflective of the true society of the 1950s, and they talked boldly about the injustices in American society and described violence, ugly aspects of America. In the 1960s, these groups and other movements like them overtly resist the dominant culture and fight to change it. That is all for now. Please watch the next video lecture to learn more.